Hi, it's Neil Sheridan. I'm glad to be coming back to campus. We'll be working on preparing you for the visit to DC in September to meet with the funders and others who can help progress your research. I'm going to work through several different things in this video to help you prepare for our session in August, and I'm also going to ask you to do a little bit of homework. I'm sorry, it's summer. I know there shouldn't be any homework, maybe a reading list or two, but now we're getting ready to really take advantage of this wonderful opportunity. As you know, the university, by choosing you as fellows, believes that you are going to be excellent ambassadors for the university out into the world, solving real problems, advancing research in your discipline, and also connecting with others and helping advance their work as well. This is an opportunity for you, both with the funders and others that will meet in DC, to really take a big step forward. Some of you are more experienced at this than others, but we believe that this is something that all of you will benefit from, and certainly we're hoping to help polish your message and get you confident in each of your meetings, whether they be in front of the larger groups or small. So for the rest of this video, I'll step you through a few of these key things that we'll do to prepare and help you be ready for your trip. So as I mentioned, the object of this video is to introduce what happens in September, but stepping back, what we're going to do in August together, and before then, what you're going to do for us as preparation. So let's talk a little bit about August. Our intention is that we will provide you with some training. You'll come well prepared with the homework that I'm attaching to this video and we'll also distribute by email. But what we want you to be able to do is prepare for 3 scenarios. And those scenarios are, first, face-to-face interviews. These are going to take place probably across a conference table, across a desk, with one of the different funding agencies, possibly with one or more people in the attendance, plus a few members of MSU, so possibly your dean, a dean's designate, one of your colleagues, or so on. So in that smaller setting, you're going to give the pitch as an opening for that discussion. The next scenario is at the podium, when we'll have 2 minutes to talk a little bit about you, your accomplishments, and your directions in front of a reception group that we're organizing with, probably 50, 60 people there from across DC. These will include people from the agencies, but also MSU alumni and other people in positions who have strong interest in what is happening at the university today, and specifically about you. I want to highlight here that our thought is that this is a celebration of your work. It is a celebration of you. It is a very friendly audience, and it is an audience that is very eager to hear what you have to say. It's a happy message. So nothing to be nervous about. It's an opportunity to share and excite people about what you're doing. And finally, the third is, after that reception and at future networking events, you'll have a chance to sort of speak with people one-on-one, possibly with a few other people listening, and they're going to be inquisitive about what you're doing. So we want to help you understand how to start that discussion. To do so, you'll have one piece of homework, which is one sentence, about what you're doing and your current status. And secondly is a shorter version of the pitch, which is really intended to be 30 seconds, maybe up to 3 minutes. You'll get signals from the people as to whether or not they want you to continue or whether they're ready to step in with some questions and comments. So the 3 scenarios are basically across the table, at the podium, and then in smaller networking groups. And as part of that, you'll see in your attachments, you have a worksheet for the pitch that follows the structure I'm going to teach you in this video, as well as the 1-sentence summary. So that is a powerful sentence. If you had to say what it is that you do with this particular project, not all of your work, not your entire research stream, what is it that you do, that sentence should cover it. So those are the activities for preparation for August. At the session, after the training, we're going to give you a little time to work and think about what we've done. We'll get a little bit of feedback from our peers, and then after the morning is sort of coming to a close, we're bringing in an expert panel. So deans, leading researchers, others from the university who have gone through this process over their careers and are intimately familiar with how you can structure your message and provide impact in terms of attracting resources and support for your work. So they will listen to your discussion, and then they'll provide some constructive feedback. At the end, we're going to wrap up that session in August with some informal tips for each other about how to feel natural when we do this and how to feel confident even if we're not. So that is the August session. So in September, The team has been working, you have been working, and others on your behalf have been helping you arrange meetings with possibly interested funders and other important contacts. These face-to-face meetings are significant because they give you a chance in a very welcoming, it's a warm introduction. These people are looking forward to meeting you in a warm setting describing what it is you're going to do. You'll start off again with one of the pitches. This pitch is going to be in different tone because it's a small conversation between one, maybe 4 different people at the most, sitting around listening to you. So you sort of use it to warm up the conversation, which might last a half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, including some question and answer period. The pitch is the introduction to that discussion. What comes after the pitch? Well, they'll certainly have some questions for you. They'll have some guidance. You're going to have prepared questions as well about what is possible there. I'm going to ask you as part of your homework to come up with some ideas about what you could ask for, the types of things that could be helpful to you. And it's not just about funding, it's many other aspects as well. And finally, they are going to be interested in sort of hearing the human side of it. So many of these funders, especially if they're in an agency or foundation, have been working in these fields for years. They're excited to hear about new innovative solutions, new research that can shed some light on finding solutions to some of the problems that they are tasked with solving. So when you sit down with them, we're going to teach you here in this video, I'll introduce it, and then we're going to do it again in August, how to tell some stories about your work. So these are not just lighthearted stories, although they can be. I'll talk a little bit about introducing humor, but it's evidentiary. It's the human interest side of things. What is it that you can say that will trigger their interest in supporting your work because it fits in with their mission? So those are stories, and those are important as well. All right, that's the introduction to the video. So what is a pitch? We've all been hit with them, sales pitches in retail settings, possibly even a pitch to join a research paper to work on a project together. So pitch, I like to say, is a tightly worded verbal communications that is intended to persuade someone. So in this case, we're going to deliver a series of different types of pitches, and obviously the tone and the delivery style is slightly different. If I'm speaking to you one-on-one across the table, it's going to be warm and friendly, confident, positive, but it's going to be totally different than if I'm standing up there trying to engage with 60 people at the same time, possibly more in future settings. So in this case, we want to talk first about the structure of the pitch and the elements, because although we're going to tailor the contents a little bit, we'll tailor the delivery style, the tone, and the power that we use to deliver it. In fact, the contents are kind of similar, so that the structure that I will teach you may be helpful. And the structure is intended to answer the questions that a listener would typically have. They're going to want to know what is it you're doing, how do you plan to do it, who is involved, and other questions related to it. So the elements that I have are basically first to capture their interest. And this is important whether or not it's one person or the group. And as you may recall, I call this the punch in the nose. It's a provocative, important, positive message that is intended to capture their interest for the rest of the 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever the length of the pitch is. We want to capture them right away. We don't use those precious few minutes that are, seconds really, that are the first impression to talk about, thank you very much, it's so wonderful. Once you sit down and get to business, once you stand on that podium, I want you to start off with your punch in the nose. Grab their attention powerfully and forcefully in the beginning. So I've given you the example in the past, and I'll do it for you here. So it goes something like this. This year, 55,000 of our husbands, our brothers, our colleagues, our friends, our sons, and others will die of prostate cancer. Our new diagnostic lab on a chip costs 50 cents per unit, can be done in non-clinical settings, and is 95% accurate in early screening of prostate cancer. So that's it. That's the punch in the nose. Just a few sentences to capture the interest and get you the next few minutes of their attention so that you can continue to build your case. And again, the pitch itself is really just intended to capture the interest for a continuing discussion, the next longer discussion about what it is you're seeking to do and why the two of you or the group of you are having this conversation. So that's the first part, punch in the nose. The next is an acronym, NABCF, and the ask. So N stands for need. What is the need? Why is this problem that you're working on important? So obviously this should sort of carry over from your punch in the nose. It is basically a further enumeration, elaboration of the case for this problem to be solved. The approach talks a little bit about the research that you're going to do, how are you going to go about it, who will you involve. In this case, because we're talking about often foreign projects, the foreign partners, if you're part of the Ag Department's efforts, you'd be looking at some of the things around the United States. But talk a little bit about who your partners are and who's on your team, both from MSU and possibly externally, so they understand that this is not just a solo project. You are in fact building a coalition behind achieving these outcomes that you're seeking to do. In the next step, we talk about the benefits, B for benefits. So why should this work be supported? Why should they help you? What is the benefit both in terms of solving the problem as a broader society, but also possibly to the funding agency or to this person that you're speaking to? Why should they help you? What are the benefits? I mean, is there an opportunity for you to reflect and help them through their media, their outreach, whatever it is that their metrics are based on, or perhaps just the satisfaction of knowing that they've helped support worthwhile efforts? You know, what are the benefits to them? And try to be specific about them and think from the listener's perspective. So if it's the whole group, we're thinking about, you know, what are some of the many faced issues that they are interested in? What are the different applications of your work outside your field? Or in general, how is it that this can be made to have greater impact? If you notice in my punch in the nose, I talk about men, in this case, the fathers, the brothers. So even if we personally do not suffer from prostate cancer or at risk of prostate cancer or involved in treating prostate cancer, we are making this accessible, understandable, and important to all those other listeners because each of them knows somebody who could be or has been a victim of this one disease. And obviously you can tailor the punch in the nose to be as broad or specific as you feel, but you want to think about, from the benefits point of view, how is it that you can structure this so the benefits are clear and they're not very, very niched? The next part is the competition. So other people are seeking these people's funding, these people's contacts, these people's time. So in making your request to have some of that, help them understand that you recognize there are other places they could be spending their attention and applying their resources. Explain why your work is superior, your work is going to be successful, and try to help build distinguishing characteristics between what you're doing and others. Now, this is not to say you disparage the competition, research teams you may be familiar with from other organizations, but instead you draw a clear, positive distinction about what it is that sets your work apart and is likely to be successful. Okay? So it is a comparative analysis, if you will, and you talk about the positives of supporting your effort. The next is the financials. Now, this has more or less relevance depending on your project work, but basically it would be a discussion of if there are financial aspects to your work or to your request before this particular listener or listeners, you would explain basically what you're doing that requires financial support and how you're going to use those funds. The pitch is not to specifically ask for money. It is not after 3 minutes or 2 minutes. You're not going to say, so if you're interested in helping achieve this important outcome, please help me by writing a grant check out to make payable here, right? What you really want to do is basically open up a discussion, because they may not in fact fund that kind of work, but they can tell you who can. And it may be that you're not ready yet to accept that kind of funding, but you are ready to accept the kind of guidance that'll get you into the proper mode of preparation so that when the time comes to submit an application or grant proposal, whatever it may be, you'd be in better shape. So the financials, some aspect. They're always curious about, you know, what are the resources you're going to consume, and financials are one of them. Others obviously are data, connections, and so on that we're going to talk about when we get to that, what is your preliminary ask. Okay. At the end of it, it is at the podium, your ask is going to be the following. You're going to invite people to come to see you when you're standing next to your poster. Each of you will have a poster at the reception. But we imagine that after a little while, people drift away from their posters and you'll engage in a more relaxed and informal networking for the remaining hours of the reception. And in that case, you know, people will come up to you, it'll be much more casual. And what we want you to do is to be able to ask at the podium what it is that you're hoping to do. So if you're looking for people who have experience in your data or who have a particular expertise, connections, whatever it might be that you're looking for, you can put that across at the podium in as specific terms as makes sense for you. As they come up to you, you're giving, again, small versions of your pitch in this networking, because they'll come up and then they've heard now several different pitches. They're going to want to get a quick refresher. So if they ask you for what it sounds like a summary of what you just said at the podium half an hour ago or an hour ago, you give them a mini version of your pitch. And in that case, the ask would be, once you understand who they are, they'll have a name badge probably, or they'll tell you who they are. You can sort of tailor a little bit that ask about, do you know anybody who, what are your thoughts on this? Do you know anybody who's in this field? Whatever that might be that's of value to you. So again, this is really an opportunity at the podium, broad announcement of what you're doing. Again, we see this reception as a celebration of you, a celebration of your work, and a celebration of your coming success, both in this particular research project, but also the course of your careers, building out this role as a sort of science, engineering, technical ambassador for the university. We have a great reputation over 100 years long. As you know, the history of AG is to sort of make sure that we build on that and make it an enduring legacy. So as many others run into these different fields, MSU continues to stand apart both for the breadth of our science, breadth of our engineering, but also our reach, because we have so many excellent researchers in the field. What can you do at the podium and then those one-on-one contexts in this, again, celebration to help further their interest in you specifically, and again, feel good about the university? It's really a great opportunity for you. Okay, so that is the summary structure of the pitch. You'll have a worksheet and the resources that help you understand what it is that you need to do to fill it out and sort of put a little bones to the ideas that you want to present. You've had other opportunities to learn about pitches. After our training here is done, you can go out into the world and change it any way you wish. We do ask that for the purposes of our practice, you follow the outline in order, and the worksheet sort of guides you through it. All you have to do is basically put bullet points in each of the boxes about the key things that you want to stress. And I'll tell you, based on experience, I really discourage you from trying to memorize verbatim and with gestures your entire pitch, whether it be the opening pitch at the table or the pitch at the podium. Try to just think about the broad themes, note them down on the outline form, and then work off of that in your memory. Remember, this is an acronym, so we start out with a punch of the nose. That's fairly easy to remember at the start, and the rest of it, NABC. If you're from New York, it's kind of easy because that was one of the TV stations up there. But if you are not from the New York area, need, approach, benefits, competition, then the F for financials, and the ask. And again, the ask is not specifically for a given amount of money. It's not a hard request that, come see me immediately. It is basically an invitation that you're asking for them to come see you at the reception, asking them to come see you at your banner, to come mingle and find you. And across the table, it's certainly going to be asking for the specific kinds of things that you need that they can help you with. And it could be that they can't help you directly, and they're going to ask you, perhaps to consider other options. So if they can give you a referral to another agency, if they can give you a referral to another program officer at their own agency, that is a win also. So that is a sort of short-ish version of the pitch. And I welcome your questions about this. We're going to run through this together at the training session, but I do ask you to prepare in advance by filling out your thoughts for each of those different categories. Once again, punch in the nose, need, approach, benefits, competition, and why you're superior, a little bit about the financials, and then your ask. That's it. So after the pitch, we use stories as part of the communications to the people that we're speaking to. So this anticipates that you're in that face-to-face meeting across the table. What kind of stories can you use to illustrate what you are doing, explain the importance of it, identify the things that are needed, and so on, for the purposes of explaining it to a non-specialist? It's possible, it's in fact likely, that the contacts who you'll be speaking to will not have exactly your background and will not be as familiar with some of the aspects of your work as you might have hoped. So you explain it to them using the power of story. The only purpose of the story is basically to explain why they should support you. Your story should sort of identify with specific things that they need to know in order to have a full understanding of what you're doing. While there is a saying that people like to do business with people they like, this is not an opportunity for you to show off your favorite jokes. Okay? Now you can insert humor into this story, and we warn you that really the only safe humor is self-deprecatory humor. And by that I mean humor at your own expense. So if there's something that happened that is in fact funny, make sure other people think it's funny too and not just you. I'd advise you to test this with your peers and with some of your colleagues before you, or maybe friends rather, first, to make sure that this is an appropriate story and that it truly is funny. If there's something you can do that makes people want to laugh or smile with you, possibly at you at your expense, but in a good-natured way, you can put that humor into your story. I warn you about making sure you understand whether or not it is humor at someone else's expense, because that is not something that you necessarily want to do. Again, so focused on your work, what are some of the things that you could talk about? So, in fact, you could use evidentiary stories, minor case studies about what it is that you've observed in the field, you did an experiment, you've gotten feedback, others have given you anecdotal evidence, etc., that you can include. So, without going off the rails in terms of detail, can you focus a short story around each of those different topics? Now, what I've done is I've created a grid. In fact, I've shown this to some of you before, and it is in your resources, and it explains how to tell an effective story. Now, depending on the amount of time you have, you should probably keep your story to a minute or two, but I like to do the following kind of structure. So, there's an opening to it. Not necessarily a big, provocative, punch-in-the-nose type opening, but an interesting opening. And then you make a couple of points, and you finish with a conclusion. So you bring us back to full circle, and it ties us back into the conversation flow and gets to your next point. So you've thought this out. So people best remember things in threes. So if you can make 3 points during your story, 1, 2, and 3, in that order, obviously, what you want to do is sort of use it as a ladder. I call it the ladder approach. You open it up, you talk about point 1, that was the unsolved need. Point 2 was your field experiences. Point 3 was validation through observation or whatever it might be. Conclusion. Okay, so that is a structured story, and it kind of keeps you, again, by outlining it like this, it gives you a chance to sort of think through what it is you want to say and make sure you don't deviate or get into too much detail or lose the thread of what you're trying to communicate. In the resources, you'll find a template for billing out this exact kind of method. And in fact, I've used the same structure to do 45-minute lectures, do hour-and-a-half presentations, and so on. It is an opportunity, a method that is very helpful in getting to the point and keeping the point as you work through what it is you're telling. As I film this, we're midsummer, and possibly you won't get to see it until you get back, so that would be beginning of August. But you still have a little bit of time. If you do see it in advance, what I'd like to do is remind you that you don't have to come up with these stories from scratch. In fact, you may be able to recollect stories that would be interesting for you to insert into this. So if you think over the past few years of your work, as your understanding grew about this particular topic, as you became engaged with it, did you in fact encounter interesting anecdotes, interesting stories that kind of can be made to fit into this structure and can be used in your conversation after the pitch? So if you ever have met a novelist or a nonfiction writer as well, they often carry around a journal, and they'll take notes on paper or into their tablet, whatever it might be, about interesting things that they observe, and they keep that. They file it away for future use. So you can do that going forward. At the moment, though, can you think about, do you have an inventory, a catalog, it just isn't organized yet, of interesting stories that would help you make a strong case for your work in these discussions that you're going to have? So this idea, I think, is nothing novel, but it might be that you don't have to create, again, go through the ladder. You simply have to think about a story and then sort of position it into it to make sure that makes sense. And then it also gives you a little bit of a catalog to choose from. Maybe your original story that you thought of is in fact beat out by a more powerful story that occurs to you a few days later. Again, something to experiment with. The purpose is to sort of excite your listener, to educate your listener, to inform them. And again, if they're non-technical in your particular field, it helps draw out and create more broader understanding about what it is that you're doing. you may have met a brilliant storyteller in your own life, perhaps a relative or a friend or someone else. People who gather others around to listen to their stories because they have a certain way of doing it. Now, what are those elements? Well, if you were to clinically observe and note down everything you see, you probably see things like timing, emphasis, the passion, the humor, all these things that can be interjected into a story. So the art of storytelling has some aspects that you can learn very quickly and use for our session in August and certainly in September. And the first one is really your story should be, if possible, not about you, okay? If you can make it about the work, about the listener, about the general society, whatever that makes sense. Don't make it about an autobiographical episode. Talk about you as being part of the picture if it's needed for understanding the context. But it should really be about your listeners. So as you make your case, how can you tell it so that it involves them? Even if they weren't part of the story, they should feel engaged with it, as if almost that they were there. The next part is really to think about the focus. So again, we want a good story should have a certain focus that's easy for us to access and keep with us in mind as we listen to the rest of the story. So the focus, again, is tied somehow to determining the value, to helping share your need, to helping share the value that was observed by others as you went out and did your field visits this summer or in past engagement with the particular topic. The last aspect of that is really, it's tuned to your listener. And that's different than about or related to your listener. Tuned to your listener is think about them. As they are sitting there at the desk or listening to you, what is the context of their work? And how is it that you can tune the story to what it is that they need to do as part of their listening and acting on your engagement with them? So also pay attention to how they interact with you. Are they very serious? Are they more friendly? Are they excited? So tune your story so that it is not disengaged from the flow of the conversation. And in fact, if you find you had something planned and it just doesn't strike you as being appropriate for this particular listener, I'd encourage you not to use it. Again, there's this aspect of humor. So humor can be a minefield. If you're going to use it to try and lighten the mood or to warm up the interaction with them, be careful about how you do it and what you speak about. So I often say the safest kind of humor is self-deprecating humor. So again, that's humor about yourself. Something amusing, something that they can, laugh with you, laugh about you, and in a good-natured sense. I'd be very careful about what the subject matter is, and in fact I urge you to find a friend, maybe not a colleague or a peer at this point, but bounce your story, your joke, your humorous anecdote off of them to make sure that you're not getting into a field of unintended messages or adverse reaction to what it is you're trying to say. That being said, there is a place for humor in most stories, and certainly in a good meeting, you'll find possibly ways to interject it. A very dry conversation might be appropriate for some of your listeners. Others, you may get a sense, would probably prefer to have a little bit of humor so that they can enjoy this engagement, this encounter with you, rather than have it be a very serious and dry affair. So again, with care, avoiding the minefields, you can use a little humor. It should be tested and then practiced before you use it, though. So in consultation with your colleagues at the Academy, we've come up with some resources. I'm using that word because it sounds so much better than homework, for you to use to prepare for our meetings in August, obviously for your trip in September. One I'd like to talk with you about is this idea of the closing the meeting checklist. So what we found is, even outside this context, many people are very uncomfortable about bringing a discussion to a proper close, so that there's something actionable, so that there's clarity about what the meeting was about and what will happen next. So we've created a close the meeting checklist for you, and I'm including it in the resources. I'd ask you to look it over. And what it does is it sort of sets out how you can use the last 5 minutes or so of your conversation to really make clear what it is that you appreciated about the engagement, to clarify, now that you have a little benefit of the discussion back and forth, what it is you're asking for, what kind of help, and then also to give a sort of proper thank you at the end with the setting out of next steps. So thank you very much. I appreciate your offer to introduce me to Dr. Jones. Would you be able to help do that by email and CC me on it, however you want to phrase that? But you're going to sort of give a short summary at the end about what are the next steps each of you have committed to. You've committed to do the following, you're going to submit something, you're going to whatever it might be. So as you're listening, you should be taking notes. And we think it might be helpful for you to sort of circle the most important items that you want to raise at the end of the discussion to come back to reiterate. If you had a question, put a big question mark in the margin of your notebook. If you are not able to sort of take notes while remaining fully focused in the conversation, and you have a particularly important meeting that you want to go to, I encourage you to bring a colleague or ask your dean or whoever it may be joining you or could join you for this session to sort of act as your scribe, to take these notes and to understand the key aspects so that even if you don't get a chance to use those notes in person to make this closing, you can follow up with an email. So I'd encourage you to do that obviously as well. I'm not sure exactly what the Academy staff have told you you should do, but I would say personally, a brief summary thank you note with some of these outlined to-dos and so on put into the note is something you'd want to send within 24 hours of your meeting. And that is basically another way to sort of close the meeting and lay out the next steps. So there's a checklist draft in the resources section. Obviously, we just want you to sort of look at it and think about it, but it is useful for you in preparing for the meeting and also for acting upon what you discuss at the end of it. One of the resources we've included for you is basically the Meeting Objectives Planner. So, who are you meeting with? Why are you meeting with them? So state pretty directly to yourself why you're having this meeting, what it is you hope to discuss. So again, this is going to be sort of organized. And as your conversation proceeds with them, you don't want to let it just drift. If you can help steer it with specific questions that you have prepared so that at the appropriate moments you can interject the questions, that is going to be very helpful and it'll probably be very much appreciated by the participant in the discussion. We also have in the draft of this that's in the resources section a list. And these are a list of suggestions for the kinds of things that you can ask for, the kind of help that you can ask for, and some of them are very generic. But if you think about them as a starting point, what could you add to them? So in the checklist, you'll see that this is kind of easy for you to enumerate, give you examples, but as the person talks to you about the resources available to them, the nature of their program, the directions they're heading in, they may offer some ideas about what it is that they can do for you. So as you come to the close of the meeting, and in a few minutes I'll talk to you about the closing the meeting checklist, that's when you can take your initial list that you're preparing before the session, listen to what you just heard them tell you, the explicit and implicit advice and suggestions, and then modify it. So when you close the meeting, you come back to a new list that is basically the merging of the two. What you thought you were going to ask for, and then indeed what they're urging you to ask for, or suggesting you find in other ways. So that is the Meeting Objectives Planning document. So the first resource in the section is that pitch template I've mentioned a few times. So this goes section by section for each of the major elements of the pitch and gives you a little chance to jot down. It is basically what we're going to provide to the expert panel to use when they listen to you. And they can use it to sort of make their own notes about what kind of suggestions they want to offer to you. The pitch elements, again, punch in the nose, need, approach, benefits, competition, the financials, and the ask are really a guide for you. We ask that you do use them in preparing for August and September, but again, I want to point out to you that very few of us have the gift of ESP. And very few of us can read other people's minds. So if you're giving your pitch, whether it be at the podium or across the table, and you happen to forget or blank out on what you wanted to say about the benefits or the second half of the approach, the reason we use the acronym is so you can skip forward and just continue your pitch with the next letter, okay? So that may be useful for you both when you outline it as well as when you start to digest it and get ready to deliver it, to think about that as an opportunity to fast forward to the next track if you needed to. We talked about the story and the power of stories. I mentioned the latter. So I've created a very simple blank for you to use to outline your story. And again, your story might be 5 sentences. On the other hand, it might be a minute or 2. It depends on how much time you need to really communicate it. I would encourage you to keep it interesting, keep it flowing. So if you listen to it, you should record your pitch, you should record your stories, and in general prepare so that you hear what you're saying. I have to tell you, as I filmed this video, I've made a couple of cuts because as it came out, it wasn't exactly what I intended, and I had to go back and redo it. In a live meeting, obviously, that's not quite possible. So when you prepare your story and you practice it, see whether you think it's really hitting the emphasis, hitting the outcomes, the desired outcomes that you're hoping for. So the last actual resource out of all of these different things we've talked about here is the one-sentence worksheet. Obviously, a one-sentence worksheet is itself going to be pretty short. The purpose of it is so that you can give a powerful, very condensed explanation of what you're doing that captures the person's interest in listening to you for the rest of your pitch or whatever it might be, the rest of the conversation. And what we're looking for is you explain the problem, the nature of your work, and a little bit of a positive update about your status. Just in the last 6 months, we've achieved whatever it might be. Okay? So that is the last part of your homework. I'm going to conclude this section on resources by reminding you of a resource that will appear for you or be presented and provided for you when you get to DC. We're going to get you hotel rooms fairly near to the reception site, and all of you will be running around in Washington, D.C. in September, and I can tell you from personal experience, and maybe you've had the experience as well, that it doesn't cool off a whole lot in September often in Washington, D.C. So after you're running around all day long for your meetings, now you've got to go to the reception at 6 o'clock. We've budgeted in time for you to go back to the hotel, enjoy a shower, and maybe take a nap. And if you do take a nap, the last resource tip would be to set your alarm because it would be terrible for you to show up at 8:30. That's it. I'm excited about our meeting in August. I hope to see you well prepared and excited about this wonderful opportunity. I want to help prepare you any way I can. I look forward to your questions. I'll see you soon.